Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The Supreme Court has struck down Hawaii's law limiting where firearms can be carried, redrawing the lines in America's gun debate. This 6-3 decision has immediate, far-reaching consequences for millions, affecting gun owners, business proprietors, and everyday citizens. The ruling is a legal thunderclap, forcing a national reckoning with the balance between liberty and safety. It intensifies deep cultural and political divisions, ensuring the gun debate will dominate the political landscape. The court has spoken, but the nation's response is just beginning. To understand today's ruling, we must revisit the Second Amendment's history. For centuries it was tied to state militias, not individual gun ownership. That changed in 2008 with District of Columbia versus Heller, when the Supreme Court recognized an individual's right to possess firearms for self-defense at home. Justice Scalia's majority opinion left open whether this right extended beyond the home, setting the stage for future legal battles. States with strict public carry laws continued to require special need for permits, sparking further challenges. Gun rights advocates argued these laws turned a constitutional right into a privilege. The next confrontation at the Supreme Court was inevitable. For over a decade after the landmark Heller decision, the boundaries of the Second Amendment remained uncertain, with lower courts and lawmakers left to interpret its meaning. But in 2022, that uncertainty was shattered. The Supreme Court's ruling in New York State, Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, sent shockwaves through the legal and political landscape, upending decades of gun regulation in one of the nation's most populous states. The court struck down New York's proper cause requirement for carrying a handgun in public, declaring that the right to bear arms extends beyond the home. Suddenly, millions of New Yorkers, and potentially millions more across the country, could claim a constitutional right to carry firearms in public spaces. The justices introduced a new test for gun laws. Any restriction must be consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. This history-based standard made it far more difficult for modern gun control measures to survive legal challenges, as courts now had to look back centuries to justify any new law. In response, states scrambled to adapt. Many quickly designated a growing list of sensitive places where guns would remain banned: parks, beaches, playgrounds, public transit, and even private businesses. The map of where guns could be carried was redrawn almost overnight, with new boundaries and exceptions. Gun control advocates argued these new restrictions were essential to protect public safety, especially in crowded or vulnerable locations. They saw the expansion of sensitive places as a necessary safeguard in a post-Bruin world. But gun rights supporters saw things differently. To them, these new laws were a thinly veiled attempt to sidestep the Supreme Court's ruling, a workaround that undermined the very rights the court had just affirmed. The debate grew louder, with both sides accusing the other of ignoring the Constitution. The Supreme Court had not clearly defined what counts as a sensitive place, leaving states, lower courts, and legal scholars to battle over the details. Each new law sparked fresh lawsuits, and judges across the country issued conflicting rulings. The result was a wave of new legislation and a flood of lawsuits, with states like Hawaii finding themselves at the center of the legal storm. The nation watched as the courts weighed in, case by case, on where the line should be drawn. As the legal battles intensified, it became clear that the Supreme Court would once again be called upon to decide the future of gun rights in America. The stage was set for another historic showdown, one that could redraw the map of gun rights for generations to come. In the wake of the Supreme Court's Bruin decision, which expanded gun rights nationwide, Hawaii lawmakers responded swiftly. They passed Act 52, a sweeping piece of legislation that redefined where firearms could be carried across the islands. The law banned guns in a long list of so-called sensitive places, including government buildings, schools, parks, and public transportation. But what truly set Act 52 apart, and sparked immediate controversy, was its approach to private property. Under Act 52, all private property open to the public, think restaurants, shops, and even parking lots, was automatically off-limits to firearms unless the property owner explicitly allowed them. This meant that, by default, carrying a gun into most businesses or public-facing spaces was illegal, unless you saw a sign welcoming firearms. This marked a dramatic shift from the traditional standard, where property owners had to post signs to ban guns. Now, the burden was reversed. If a business wanted to allow guns, it had to make that clear with a posted notice. For many, this was a subtle but powerful change, effectively making most of Hawaii's public spaces gun-free zones by default. Gun owners and advocacy groups quickly mobilized, arguing that the law undermined the very right to carry that Bruin had affirmed. They claimed that by making it so difficult to legally carry a firearm in public, Hawaii was sidestepping the Supreme Court's intent and rendering the right to self-defense meaningless for ordinary citizens. Their lawsuits pointed to the sheer scope of the restrictions. With so many places off limits, they argued, the law effectively nullified Bruin by turning nearly all public and private spaces into gun-free zones. Maps of the islands showed vast swaths where carrying was prohibited, leaving only a patchwork of areas where the right to bear arms could actually be exercised. The debate quickly grew heated, drawing in not just gun owners, but also business owners, community leaders, and advocates for property rights. Some argued that property owners should have the ultimate say over what happens on their land, while others insisted that the right to self-defense shouldn't be so easily curtailed. Public meetings and courtrooms became battlegrounds for these competing visions of safety, liberty, and control. Hawaii's Attorney General stood firm, defending Act 52 as a necessary measure to protect both public safety and the rights of property owners. Officials argued that the law struck a careful balance, respecting the Supreme Court's ruling while also addressing the unique needs and concerns of Hawaii's communities. As the legal battle played out in federal court, it became clear that the stakes were much bigger than just gun policy. At its core, the fight was about the limits of state power, how far a state can go in regulating public spaces, and where the line should be drawn between individual rights and collective safety. The outcome would not only shape Hawaii's future, but could set a precedent for the entire nation. The Supreme Court took up Hawaii's case, ready to clarify the limits of sensitive places and state power. Liberal justices questioned whether the Second Amendment should override property owners' wishes and public safety. Conservative justices pressed Hawaii on whether its sweeping bans defied the court's previous rulings. The debate centered on history. Were there true historical analogs for Hawaii's broad restrictions? Both sides argued over whether 19th-century laws justified modern bans. The justices' split revealed a deep divide over how to apply history to today's gun laws. On November 12, 2025, the Supreme Court struck down Hawaii's law in a 6-3 decision. Justice Thomas for the majority said Hawaii's bans failed the history and tradition test and accused the state of defying the court. The ruling dismantles Blue State's main strategy for regulating public carry since Bruin. The court held that property owners can ban guns, but the state cannot impose a default ban on their behalf. The dissent warned the decision sacrifices public safety and property rights for an absolutist reading of the Second Amendment. The new standard states can't make public carry rights illusory by banning guns in most places. The Supreme Court's decision sends shockwaves across the country, with immediate and far-reaching consequences for Main Street America. In states like California, where strict gun control laws have long been a point of pride and a perceived safeguard for public safety, the ruling upends years of legislative effort. Lawmakers, law enforcement, and everyday citizens are now left to grapple with a new reality, one where the legal landscape around carrying firearms in public is fundamentally altered. In New York and New Jersey, states that have historically imposed some of the nation's toughest restrictions on concealed carry, the decision throws open the doors to a wave of legal challenges and policy changes. Local officials are scrambling to interpret the ruling and determine how to respond, while residents wonder what it will mean for their neighborhoods and daily routines. Maryland, too, finds its long-standing regulations in jeopardy, as courts and lawmakers are forced to reconsider the balance between individual rights and collective safety. The uncertainty is palpable, with many unsure how quickly the changes will take effect or how they will play out on the ground. For millions living in America's largest cities, the prospect of more people legally carrying guns in public spaces is a dramatic shift. It's not just a legal change, it's a cultural one, altering the fabric of daily life. Parks, subways, shopping centers, and busy sidewalks may now feel different, as the presence of firearms becomes more common and visible. For some Americans, this is a long-awaited victory for self-defense and personal liberty. They see the decision as a restoration of constitutional rights, empowering law-abiding citizens to protect themselves and their families. Gun owners and advocacy groups are celebrating, hopeful that the ruling will lead to even broader recognition of Second Amendment rights nationwide. But for others, the decision brings a wave of anxiety and concern. Parents, teachers, and community leaders worry about the risks of more guns in public, especially in crowded or sensitive places. The fear of accidental shootings, misunderstandings, or escalated conflicts weighs heavily on their minds, and some feel less safe in spaces they once took for granted. Small business owners now face tough choices. They must decide whether to allow firearms on their premises, a decision that could affect their relationships with customers and their standing in the community. Posting a "No Guns Allowed" sign is no longer just a policy. It's a statement that could invite debate, backlash, or even legal challenges. These decisions are deeply personal and often divisive, forcing shopkeepers and restaurateurs to take sides in a national debate that has landed squarely on their doorsteps. Conversations about safety, rights, and responsibility are now part of the daily routine for many Main Street businesses. In effect, the Supreme Court's ruling outsources a contentious policy fight to individual shopkeepers and local businesses, making them the new front line in America's ongoing gun debate. Their choices will shape the atmosphere of Main Street for years to come. Politically, the decision is likely to deepen divisions and fuel further polarization. Gun policy, already a hot-button issue, will become even more central in upcoming elections, as candidates and voters alike grapple with the implications of a more permissive national standard. The battle over gun rights and regulations now shifts to other fronts, like red flag laws, waiting periods, and mandatory training requirements. Lawmakers at every level are preparing for new legal challenges and legislative battles, as the country debates how best to balance freedom and safety. As the patchwork of state gun laws gives way to a more uniform, permissive national standard, Main Street America stands at a crossroads, facing new questions, new responsibilities, and a future that feels more uncertain than ever. Reaction has been swift and divided. Gun rights groups celebrate the ruling as a victory for constitutional liberty and self-defense. Hawaii's Attorney General and gun safety advocates call it a dangerous setback for public safety and property rights. Legal experts warn the court's strict historical test makes it hard to address modern gun violence. Some scholars say the court is cherry-picking history. Others argue it protects against judicial overreach. The decision is seen as either a triumph of principle or a failure of pragmatism, depending on perspective. The Supreme Court's decision marks a new chapter in America's gun debate, expanding the Second Amendment's reach. More guns will be carried in public and private spaces, but the long-term consequences remain uncertain. The ruling amplifies tensions, forcing citizens, business owners, and lawmakers to navigate a new legal landscape. The debate now shifts to other regulations and the boundaries of state power. The future of gun policy will be shaped not just by courts, but by legislatures, city councils, and voters. America must now confront what kind of nation it wants to be, balancing liberty, safety, and community. The Supreme Court has spoken, but the national conversation is far from over.